Research Tips. Hi, my name is Melissa Fraser-Arnott, and I'm a PhD candidate in the SJSU QUT Gateway PhD program. I created this video to share some tips that helped me to complete my Stage 2 and confirmation of candidature reports ahead of schedule. These tips could be applied to research projects of different lengths and for various programs of study, and are not exclusively for PhD students. They're based on my own experiences and represent only one way of completing a research paper. An important part of the research process, especially for a large-scale project like a PhD, is to figure out which strategies work best for you. The first major step in the research process is to clarify your question. Your research question will guide your lit review. You can find your lit search terms from your research question. I started by taking a look at the keywords in my research question and considering possible synonyms to use as search terms. While examining my research question, I also started to consider which sources to search for articles related to this topic. You'll see the list of disciplines in the box at the bottom of this screen. I didn't conduct searches for all of my terms at once. Instead, I picked one or two searches for each search period. I kept a record of what source I checked and what search terms I used. I like to make sure that I can access my articles easily in the future, so I used the email feature of electronic databases to send copies of articles to myself, and saved these copies in a folder on my computer. I ended up creating two folders of articles, one for those that I had read and one for those that I had not yet read. After reading an article, I renamed the file by giving it a sequential number starting with file 001. At this point, my project folder contains 926 read articles. This naming convention will come up again later. The search terms that I used evolved throughout the project based on the types of articles that I found from my earlier searches and the new ideas that emerged through my reading. It is also important to remember that you are going to need to find literature on your chosen methodology, as well as on subjects related to your literature review chapter. It can be helpful to alternate between lit review searches related to methodology and related to theories and related topics for your lit review section. This will give you time to process what you've read, and you might be surprised to find new ideas that inform your next searches based on articles that you actually found for the other chapter. Managing reading time. It can be very tempting to keep reading articles forever, but research projects have deadlines, which mean that we can't allow ourselves to give in to this temptation. In order to keep myself on schedule, I set strict deadlines for myself in terms of completing research and reading. As I mentioned earlier, I spaced out my searches. Although my searches did reveal significant numbers of results, I typically chose between 8 and 40 articles from a search results list. I determined that I was only going to spend 1 or 2 weeks reading articles from any lit search topic. After that point, I would incorporate whatever I had read into my draft report. I tried to start with the articles that seemed most relevant to my research, based on the information in the title and abstract. After an article was read, it was moved into the Read Articles folder. Articles were retitled and moved whether they included relevant content from my report or not. Articles that I wasn't able to read during that time period could be read in a future period based on my scheduling of relevant topics. Reading articles. There's a lot of advice available on how to read articles, and they are worth investigating. One piece of advice in reading articles is that you don't actually need to read and memorize every word in that article. I've found that certain sections of articles are more helpful than others for certain sections of your project. I tended to focus during my lit review and early project phases on the abstract, introduction, lit review, and discussion. I tend not to spend much time looking at the results section. The abstract should provide you with an idea of the main results of the study. The introduction should give you an idea of the context of the research question. The literature review will be the most interesting section when you are preparing your own lit review, because it will reveal not only what literature is being examined, by other authors, but also how those authors are organizing that literature. I take notes while reading articles because I find that this act helps to keep my attention focused, and it helps me to access and organize my ideas later. I try and copy down exact quotes that capture the following types of information: theories or key concepts, accounts of the history or trends that show the evolution of ideas, key theorists and their central ideas, statements that make predictions or express assumptions related to my research question, and accounts of why the methodology was selected and how it was applied. I recorded each of these quotes on a cue card, which included the article number in the top right corner. The article number matched the number of the renamed article file in my Read Articles folder. Numbering the quote card is very important because it makes it much easier to keep cards in order, especially if they get knocked off of a desk. The quote was followed by a page number or numbers in which it was found. This helped to keep items in order, but it also helped to make citation notes for endnotes and footnotes in my paper. I worked with paper cue cards because it meant that I could take notes with me on the go. I recorded notes at night while watching TV, during car rides, while at the cottage, any place that I had time to work. After the end of a week of article reading, I'd type all of the notes that I had gathered in cue cards. This gave me a second chance to process what I'd read. I typed the notes into a Word document where it was easier to catch typos, and then transferred them into an Excel workbook that I set up for my PhD. My Excel workbook contained 2 sheets. The first sheet contained citation information for all of the articles that I had read. Although I knew that my PhD would use the APA citation style, I recorded more information than would be necessary for this citation format. For example, I included our authors' first names in full, even though only first initials were needed for the APA citation style. It's important to do this because different journals use different citation styles, and I wanted to make sure that I'd have all of the information that I needed for a citation, regardless of what style was required. The citations were ordered to reflect the article numbers assigned when files were renamed. The second Excel sheet contained the quotes from the cue cards. The sheet was formatted as a table to allow for content filtering. The sheet contained the following columns: article number, the actual quotation, citation number, or citation information, which was actually presented as authors' last names, years, and page numbers, and a category keyword to allow for quick sorting. I actually ended up adding the keyword category partway through my research project to allow for faster sorting. It became vital because of the sheer number of quotes that were produced in the project. At present, my PhD research spreadsheet contains over 6,000 quotes, which is a bit much for simple Control-F find searching. Analyzing your reading. My first step in writing a draft is to carefully sort through groups of quotes to find patterns or trends. The column category in the Excel sheet provides the first level of filtering. I tend to copy and paste all of the quotes in a category into a Word document because I find this format a bit easier to read. Next, I read the quotes and create a heading for each that describes the key theme, and I move that onto a new sheet with the heading above the quote. I do this for all the quotes in the group. Next, I review my categories to determine if any of them can be grouped together. This process of refining categories and regrouping quotes could require multiple drafts. With large numbers of quotes, this might actually be a 3 or 4 step process. My next step is to review each group of quotes and to write sentences that paraphrase the key ideas from each of the quotes. I expand this with my own analysis of the significance of this data, or these quotes, for my research. This includes discussions of topics such as: how do these findings relate to my research question? What assumptions are being made? What are the implications of or predictions being made by these statements? What challenges to these ideas exist? For example, are any authors refuting the statements being made in these articles? And can these ideas be transferred to my target population or research context? Even if you don't record this in your draft, it is important to consider one more question when reviewing a set of concepts, and that is, what is your reaction to these findings? This is particularly important, identifying any assumptions or emotional reactions that you have related to particular research, especially if you're using a research method like grounded theory or phenomenology, in which researcher biases or potential researcher biases need to be addressed. You will find that these category sections, which now contain both quotes and summaries of quotes, as well as analysis, take you well along the way to your report content. Make sure that you save your work so that you can come back to it later. I believe in preparing drafts quickly and getting them to your supervisors for comment early in the research process so that you can avoid dedicating too much time working on ideas that do not end up contributing to your final project. Your supervisors would be able to help you determine if you're on track and can give you recommendations for future reading. I set a goal for myself to produce a new or revised draft of my Stage 2 thesis proposal every 4 to 6 weeks. This meant that I would spend approximately 2 or 3 days doing database searches, 3 weeks of article reading and note-taking, 2 days of note transcription, 1 day of initial code grouping, and 2 or 3 days of analysis and writing. This sheet gives you a sample timeline for how you can go through 2 rounds of article reading and a round of draft writing within a 31-day period. You will always feel that there's more to read and analyze at the end of this period, but restricting your time will force you to think strategically about what you've read and to focus on those aspects of the reading that help you to build your report. This is the method that I've been using with my PhD research project. I hope that some of these tips will be helpful to you, whether or not you choose to apply any of them. It's important to remember on this project or any other large project that it can be accomplished if the tasks are broken down into small, manageable steps. I wish you the best of luck on your research project. Thank you.